February 14, 1933. Bumpy Johnson faced odds of 12-1. Dutch Schultz had dispatched his most dangerous men, Tommy, the executioner, Vento, Marty, Icepick, Delaney, and 10 more killers whose identities were unknown even to the police. They trapped Bumpy in the basement of the Cotton Club. There were no witnesses and no escape. At just 27 years old, Bumpy was still learning the streets, while Dutch stood as the most powerful mob figure in New York. Everyone expected the same outcome. Bumpy Johnson, dead in a basement. But Dutch didn't realize that Bumpy never followed anyone else's rules. 90 minutes later, only one of those 12 men would walk out alive, carrying a message that turned Dutch Schultz pale, the same man responsible for more than 40 killings. This is the story of the night Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. To grasp what unfolded, you have to understand Harlem in 1933. The Harlem Renaissance had faded, and the Great Depression struck hard. Desperation filled the streets, and desperate people gambled. The numbers Rakatan illegal lottery was Harlem's lifeline. A nickel could win you $50. For people earning $7 a week, that small coin meant hope, and hope had value. Dutch Schultz recognized that value. A German Jewish mobster from the Bronx, he had earned millions through bootlegging during Prohibition. But as Prohibition neared its end, he searched for a new empire. Looking south toward Harlem, he saw money pouring through the numbers game and decided he wanted every bit of it. There was only one obstacle: Harlem already had its rulers. Madame Stephanie St. Clair, known as the Queen of Numbers, and her enforcer, a young Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't typical muscle. He was intelligent, self-educated, in prison, reading Shakespeare and philosophy. He understood that respect in Harlem wasn't purchased through fear. It was earned through loyalty. When Madame St. Clair's runners were robbed, Bumpy recovered the money. When corrupt officers tried to extort black businesses, Bumpy made the problem disappear, sometimes violently, sometimes by destroying careers and reputations. Strategic and unyielding, he refused to submit to Dutch Schultz. In January 1933, Dutch sent representatives to Harlem. They met Madame St. Clair at her club on 133rd Street with a clear message: partner with Dutch, pay tribute, or be buried. Madame St. Clair, a Caribbean immigrant who had built her empire from nothing, looked at the men seated in her club and told them to leave. The emissaries turned toward Bumpy, who stood silently in the corner. "You want to be smart about this, boy?" they asked. Bumpy neither moved nor spoke. He only stared, the kind of stare that made men think about their life insurance. They left and reported back to Dutch Schultz. A man unused to hearing no, especially from a black woman and her enforcer, made his decision: burn it all down. Starting with Bumpy, he didn't just want him dead, he wanted it done publicly and brutally. A death that would force everyone else into line. Then came February 14, 1933, Valentine's Day, an ironic date for what was about to occur. Bumpy received word that Dutch's men planned to strike Madame St. Clair's main counting house on Lenox Avenue at dawn. He went alone to investigate. That may have been his first mistake, or perhaps he knew exactly what he was walking into. The Cotton Club basement wasn't the famous venue known to white audiences downtown. This was the real after-hours spot where Harlem's power players gathered to drink, gamble, and settle disputes. The basement held crates of liquor, poker tables, and only one exit through a narrow staircase, an ideal setting for an ambush. At 4:32 a.m., Bumpy walked down the stairs. The room was nearly black, lit only by a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. Then he heard the sharp clicks of gun safeties. 12 weapons, 12 men, emerging from the shadows. Tommy the executioner stepped forward alongside Vento. Tommy had killed 16 men, always up close, always staring them in the eye. He smiled and said, "Dutch sends his regards." Bumpy stood still, arms at his sides, his expression calm. Slowly, he scanned the room, counting every face. 12. His gaze returned to Tommy. That all he sent. Tommy's grin faded. People often misunderstood Bumpy Johnson. He didn't bluff or posture when he spoke. He meant every word. Standing there, outnumbered 12-1, and asking if that was everyone, wasn't arrogance. It was calculation. You've got about 5 seconds to beg, Tommy said, as he raised his gun. Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "You're making a mistake." "What mistake?" "You're about to die." The mistake, Bumpy replied slowly, "is thinking I came here alone." The guns remained aimed at him, but hesitation crept in. Tommy glanced toward the staircase. He looked back at Bumpy. "You're bluffing." For the first time, Bumpy smiled. "Then shoot." No one fired. What Dutch Schultz's men didn't understand was that Bumpy had been fighting since he was 10 years old in Charleston, South Carolina. Long before Harlem, street battles, prison riots, territorial wars, he had learned something most never do. Violence has a rhythm, and in that basement, Bumpy controlled it. Tommy's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance. Bumpy moved. Later, no one could fully explain what happened next. The lone survivor's account was scattered and unclear, but certain details were undeniable. Bumpy didn't reach for a gun, he went for the light. Asterisk with a single punch, the hanging bulb shattered. Asterisk darkness swallowed the room, followed instantly by chaos. Gunshots rang out wildly as men fired at shadows and noises. Tommy shouted, "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" But panic doesn't obey commands. Asterisk inside that darkness, Bumpy became something else. He knew the layout. He had played poker there countless times. Every crate, every table, every corner was familiar. Dutch's men had no such advantage. Asterisk one after another. They fell. Not from careful gunfire. Bumpy didn't waste bullets. He used his hands, their confusion, and the fact that in their fear, they were hitting each other. Asterisk, a scream echoed. A body struck the floor. Another shot. Another cry. Asterisk, Tommy tried to regroup them. The stairs. Get to the stairs. But Bumpy was already there. The violence lasted perhaps 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That felt endless. Then came silence. Asterisk when someone upstairs finally opened the basement door and light poured down the staircase. The scene was staggering. 11 men lay scattered across the floor. Not all dead, but all broken. Fractured bones. Wounds from friendly fire. Unconscious bodies, blood everywhere. Asterisk against the wall sat one man still breathing hard. His gun trembling in his hand. Marty "Icepick" Delaney. The only one left conscious. Asterisk, Bumpy Johnson was gone. Vanished without a trace. Marty Delaney dragged himself up the stairs. A painful climb that took nearly 20 minutes. Every movement hurt, likely broken ribs and injuries far worse. By the time he reached the street, the sun was beginning to rise. He flagged down a cab, waving blood-soaked cash. Asterisk the Bronx, he gasped. Arthur Avenue, Dutch Schultz's headquarters. Asterisk at 8:17 a.m., Marty staggered into Dutch's social club. Dutch was calmly eating breakfast eggs, toast, coffee while reading the newspaper. He looked up, saw Marty covered in blood, and froze. Asterisk, where are the others? Asterisk, Marty couldn't answer at first. He simply shook his head. Asterisk, where are my men? Asterisk, dead, Marty whispered at last. All of them. He let me live. Asterisk, Dutch slowly rose from his chair. He what? Asterisk, he let me live. To give you a message. Asterisk, the room fell silent. Lieutenants, accountants, bodyguards, everyone stopped and watched. Asterisk, what message? Dutch asked, his voice cold. Asterisk, Marty reached into his jacket. Dutch's men tensed, hands moving toward their guns. But Marty pulled out a single playing card, the ace of spades, stained with blood, and placed it on the table. Asterisk, he said to tell you, Harlem's not for sale. And if you send more men, send more cards. He's collecting a deck. Dutch stared at the card for a long moment while his men waited for orders. They expected retaliation, 50 men sent to burn Harlem down. Instead, Dutch picked up the card, examined it, and smiled, not with amusement, but with acceptance. He's got nerve, I'll give him that. Boss, we can't let this. Dutch raised his hand, silencing him. Do you know what it costs to go to war with someone who isn't afraid to die? Someone smarter than you. Someone backed by an entire neighborhood. He shook his head. It costs everything. And for what? Numbers? Money? There's easier money. He dropped the card into an ashtray and set it on fire. We're done in Harlem. Let Bumpy Johnson have it. The decision stunned everyone. Dutch Schultz, the man who fought Lucky Luciano, who killed his own partners, who never retreated, was backing down. Why? Because Bumpy had proven something even Dutch respected. He was willing to die for what he stood for. Men like that aren't easily fought. You either eliminate them or leave them alone, and Dutch couldn't eliminate him. Years later, during the 1970s, a reporter located a former Cotton Club employee and asked what truly happened that night. The old man smiled. You want the truth? Bumpy wasn't alone. Then what happened? He had 4 men upstairs the entire time. Once Dutch's crew went down, they locked the basement door from the outside, trapped them in. Bumpy could have killed all 12 if he wanted, but he let one survive on purpose. Killing them starts a war. Humiliating them ends it. Whether that account was fact or legend remains uncertain. What is certain is that, after that night, Dutch Schultz never sent another man into Harlem. Bumpy Johnson became the undisputed king of Harlem's underworld. For the next 35 years, he guarded the neighborhood as if it were family, not with reckless violence, but with strategy, intelligence, and a personal code. Bumpy kept that ace of spades, framed it, and hung it in his office as a reminder. Respect isn't given, it's taken. February 14, 1933. 12 men walked into a basement. Only one walked out, and Harlem was never the same. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. We're sharing the Bumpy Johnson stories history overlooked, the moments that built his legend and the code that made him untouchable. Leave a like if you believe Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem, and tell us in the comments what would you have done if you were Dutch Schultz. More legendary stories are coming next. Don't miss them. After that night, Dutch Schultz never attempted another move against Harlem. Bumpy Johnson rose as the unquestioned ruler of the neighborhood's underworld. For the next 35 years, he watched over Harlem as if it were his own family, relying not on random violence, but on planning, intelligence, and a strict code. The ace of spades stayed with him. He framed it and hung it in his office as a constant reminder that respect is not handed over, it is claimed. February 14, 1933. 12 men entered a basement. Only one came back out. From that moment on, Harlem was never the same. If this story impacted you, press the subscribe button. We're bringing you the Bumpy Johnson stories that history overlooked, the events that shaped his legend, and the code that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you believe Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem, and share in the comments what your move would have been if you were Dutch Schultz. More legendary stories are on the way, don't miss them.